Ishiro Honda once said that the tragedy of monsters is the fact that they are born too tall, too strong, and too heavy. And at least in the context of the films, he was right. These attributes have led to Godzilla having many disagreements with the Japanese military. But at least in the context of pop culture, these attributes have led to the opposite for Godzilla. They've allowed him to prosper and produce 28 movies. But I want to analyze this and discover what it truly is about Godzilla that attracts people to him and why he's been so endearing. And the only way to truly do that successfully is to review every Godzilla movie ever made. Some people might be angry, but regardless, welcome to Zazubaar's Godzilla Palooza. Greetings, miscredited Japanese Defense Forces. I am Zazubaar, and welcome back to Godzilla Palooza. It's day 27, and today we're going to be taking a look at a fan favorite. And not only is it a fan favorite, but it's widely regarded amongst regular critics and Godzilla fans as one of the absolute best of the Godzilla franchise. Today, we're going to be taking a look at 2001's GMK, but in full title, Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah Giant Monsters All-Out Attack. Wow. Quite a title. But it deserves that quite a title because this movie is absolutely fantastic. And I want to start off this review by saying Shizuke Kaneko was born to direct a Godzilla movie. Now, for those of you who don't know, Kaneko had already proven his worth to monster movie fans and moviegoers in the late 90s with his excellent Heisei Gamera trilogy. And with that film and with his repeated statement of, I want to direct a Godzilla movie, fans were more than willing to give him not only the benefit of the doubt, but also praying to see him direct some sort of Godzilla movie. And in 2001, with the Millennium series of Godzilla firmly establishing itself as Godzilla Anthology, Toho decided to give Kaneko a shot and give him the chance to write the screenplay, and he came up with the basic premise of GMK. Though it is noteworthy that his original premise was somewhat different. He originally wanted to, rather than having Ghidorah and Mothra being two of the Guardian monsters, he originally wanted it to be Baragon, Anguirus, and Varan be the three Guardian monsters defending Japan. And his reasoning was that he wanted to make Godzilla look much bigger and stronger than the three monsters he was fighting, because he wanted to make it seem plausible that there would literally need to be three monsters to fight Godzilla. So, Toho, however, didn't think that Anguirus and Varan would be able to sell tickets, so they wanted to be able to market the film, have two of their more popular creations be part of the cast, so they opted for Ghidorah and Mothra. Kaneko decided that the only way to make this work with his story was to make the monsters much smaller and weaker than they have been in the past. So he had to make Ghidorah smaller than Godzilla and make him less powerful, and the same thing went for Mothra, which is unusual given that Ghidorah is more often than not characterized as being bigger than Godzilla. So definitely a strange thing for fans. And he also drastically changed Mothra's power set, personality, and appearance to make her work for this film. I'm gonna be honest, I personally would have preferred to see Anguirus and Varan be the monsters that Godzilla fights in this film. I just think that it would make more sense for them to be three monsters that kind of look similar, but and also, I don't know, I think it would have worked better if there would have been those three. But in the end, it doesn't really matter because they perform their need to the story, and overall I think the film works fine with Ghidorah, Mothra, and Baragon being the three monsters. Actually, to compensate for Varan not being in the film, the designer of the suits, who was a big fan of Varan, actually designed Varan's face into the three heads of Ghidorah, which if you compare the three heads on the GMK Ghidorah to past versions and then compare it to Varan, you can definitely see where he's coming from. So this version of Ghidorah is very, very unique. So I never was a big fan of GMK. I always really, really liked it, but it was always a very strange one for me. It's a very, very unique Godzilla film, and that's ultimately one of the things that I think makes it one of the best, but when I was younger and when I was, you know, not into YouTube and all that, I wasn't really a big fan of this film because it was so kind of different, especially with the characterizations of Ghidorah and Mothra. So I never could quite get over that hump of these are very, very different versions of these characters. But watching it for this review and watching it in the past, you know, in like the past year or so, I finally come to agree with the masses that yes, this is indeed one of the best Godzilla films ever made. Potentially the best of the Millennium series, though it does definitely have competition. It's definitely, if not the best, one of the best of the Millennium series, and is far, far superior to the previous film. And overall, it's just a great, great Godzilla film. The thing for me that makes it so great, one of the things I always liked about it is the characterization of Godzilla and the tone. This is a very, very, very dark movie, and it takes Godzilla very much so back to his roots. And I don't mean that in like Godzilla's not just causing destruction like in the Heisei series. Like the Heisei series took Godzilla back to his roots in characterization. GMK takes Godzilla back to his roots in tone and characterization. And in fact, I think Godzilla's characterization is, if not as cruel as the original Gojira, if maybe even a little more cruel. Like, he is a hateful, hateful creature in this film. And it's extremely apparent in that also his origin is a little different in this film. So that's my favorite aspect of GMK, and easily the most fascinating and the most original. So it's one of the most unique Godzilla films, definitely one of the best. It has the most distinct vision of the entire Millennium series. Like, I feel like this movie makes the best use of the whole anthology angle and knows exactly what it wants to be and tells that story in an hour and 45 minutes, and then it's done. So I feel like this film is the most comfortable in being an anthology story. So it really, really works for me in that regard as well. So with all that stuff said about GMK, let's get into the plot of the film. Like I've been saying for a while now, the plot is extremely intricate. I'm just going to basically outline the premise and the basic progression. Basically what happens is it's believed that Godzilla is returning after over 50 years of, under 50 years a little bit, of his original 54 attack. Again, this film is a complete reboot to the original, just like, well, you know, like the Millennium series is going to be. It's a complete reboot. It goes back to the original. It's a sequel to that. And Godzilla hasn't attacked since 1954, and now with the destruction of an American nuclear sub, it seems like he's returning. In conjunction with Godzilla's apparent return, it seems that an ancient legend is coming true. That 3 guardian monsters will rise up to defend the Japanese homeland from something. And apparently that terror is Godzilla. So the 3 guardian monsters are seemingly waking up to combat Godzilla. And once Godzilla finally returns, one of the guardian monsters, called Baragon, is going forth to fight Godzilla and defend the Japanese homeland from him. However, he isn't nearly strong enough to combat Godzilla, and very quickly is defeated. Godzilla makes an advance on Yokohama, and at this point, 2 other guardian monsters have shown up called Mothra and King Ghidorah. Well, they don't call him King Ghidorah, although that is in the title, so whatever, Ghidorah. I think, did they call him King Ghidorah? I don't know. We'll just call him Ghidorah for this review, just to be safe. Mothra and Ghidorah both wake up. However, they haven't been sleeping for long enough, and Ghidorah is not strong enough yet to fight Godzilla, and is apparently supposed to have 8 heads, but because he was woken up early, it only has 3. Fucking brilliant. So Mothra and Ghidorah both advance on Yokohama to combat Godzilla. Godzilla totally trampling through the military's forces. And then going on to trample through Mothra and King Ghidorah, though that's much more tough. The military finally comes up with a way of potentially defeating Godzilla by using a new missile called the D3, which is basically a drill missile. And they use this in Godzilla, and it seems to have more of an effect than their other weapons, but still nothing to truly hurt him. So the military comes up with a plan to wait for Godzilla to be wounded by Ghidorah or Mothra, and send a D3 into that wound in order for the missile to work on the interior, so that way it doesn't have the problem of Godzilla being indestructible on the outside. So Mothra is killed, but all of Mothra's energy goes into Ghidorah, excuse me. And Ghidorah finally rises up as the true King Ghidorah. I think that's when they start calling him that. I forget, whatever. 1,000-year-old dragon. Ghidorah finally has the energy to fight Godzilla, and the two take their battle underwater. And now Godzilla finally has a wound that one of our main human cast in the film, named Commander Tachibana, uses the opportunity to launch a D3 missile into Godzilla's wound. However, in order to do this, because Godzilla destroyed all the launchers on the boat, they have to mount the missile on a research vessel called the Satsuma, and Commander Tachibana pilots it himself to go down and shoot it into Godzilla's wound. Ghidorah and Godzilla continue to fight. There is another naval commander with Tachibana who is covering Tachibana while he attempts to do this, and he too has a D3 missile. Accidentally launches his D3 into Ghidorah, and Ghidorah is seemingly killed. However, one of our other leads, named Yuri, Tachibana's daughter, drops a strange mystical stone she found in the forest early in the film that she drops into the water, which powers up Ghidorah and gives him newfound strength to fight Godzilla. Him and Godzilla continue to fight, but again, it's still not enough. Godzilla, in the end, kills Ghidorah. However, Ghidorah, Mothra, and Baragon's energy goes into Godzilla, and this seemingly convinces Godzilla to leave. I'm not really sure what happens, but all their energy goes into Godzilla, and Godzilla goes underwater, allowing Tachibana to finally actually ride his submarine down Godzilla's throat and launch a D3 missile into Godzilla's body that cuts a hole in his neck, so whenever he tries to launch his atomic blast, it goes out his throat and continues to hurt him. Godzilla tries, I think 2 times, to use his atomic breath, but in the end it ends up killing him, and then the 3rd time it causes his body to explode and seemingly destroy him, leaving no trace. General Tachibana seemingly, Commander, I keep wanting to say General. Commander Tachibana seemingly is also destroyed in the explosion. No, he's not. Excuse me. He exits Godzilla's body before he blows up through the wound he created, and then Godzilla blows up, and Tachibana survives, and the human cast is left to lament the events of the film. However, at the end, there is a pretty clever stinger where we cut to the bottom of the sea, and there is an object on the bottom of the ocean that's covered in fish, and it actually turns out to be Godzilla's heart still beating. Cue the epic Akira Fukube music. The plot of GMK is a great one. There's a great progression, there is a great pace, and overall the film is very, very unique, in that it's one of the only Godzilla films that has a very mystical angle to it. Kind of par for the course, though, with Shizuke Kaneko given his Gamera trilogy. However, this is easily the most mystical of all the Godzilla films, and that Godzilla's origin now lies in the mystical, with Godzilla actually being the accumulated power of all those lost souls in World War II. So now, Godzilla is returning because Japan has apparently forgotten what happened in World War II and wants to forget about it, but Godzilla's here to remind them of it. So that's very, very mystical. So definitely Shizuke Kaneko's hand, again, given his Gamera trilogy, and it seemingly works. What's really great about it is that it's not just a random mystical thing to change Godzilla's origin, but what makes it great is the fact that it kind of adds to what was already there with Godzilla. Godzilla has always been that. He's always been the accumulated anger of what happened in World War II. I mean, he's a representation of the H-bomb, of the atomic weapons, and Godzilla represented that in the '54 film with the devastation Japan received after World War II with the atomic bombs. So it's only natural that Godzilla would represent that. And Kaneko himself has come out and said, look, the only way I could do it was with mystical souls. So I completely understand. And it's not just a conceit to allow that theme to be present and to allow that this being a different version of Godzilla. In that it's said that this is not, he's kind of a ghost Godzilla, and that's what this character is officially known as. That he is not the same Godzilla that attacked in '54. He's an undead, angry spirit of that. And that's why he attacks. And it's not just a conceit to allow that to happen, it's an addition to what's already there, and makes the film very, very unique. So I really like the mystical angle, and it's very, very interesting and cool, and makes the film feel very, very unique. So I love that element of the plot. What I also really, really like is the progression and the pacing and the tone. There's a great build-up to the story and a great progression of the story. There's a great mysterious and kind of creepy build-up with both the origins of the Guardian monsters and also the origins of Godzilla. So there's some really, really great build-up in this film and some great payoff with it. And just the atmosphere surrounding the return of Godzilla and the arrival of the Guardian monsters is all great and very, very interesting. So that's all fantastic. What's also really impresses me with GMK is the very cinematic pacing. And this is something that I really appreciate in a Godzilla film. Godzilla 2000 had this too, but GMK does it better. What I mean by that is that GMK has a very cinematic pace in that, and I've been talking about this with all the best Godzilla films, the film is slow when it needs to be slow, when it's building up character progression and plot elements, and then it's also fast-paced when it needs to be fast-paced and epically paced. Monster battles. GMK is easily the best representation of that, in that the film is perfectly paced. It's masterfully crafted by Shizuke Kaneko. He's earned the name the Christopher Nolan of Japan with GMK and also with his Gamera trilogy. And just the fact of the matter is that he got to make his Gamera trilogy, which I think was kind of good practice for doing a great Godzilla movie, and GMK is the good after product of that. So it's very masterfully crafted, and in both story and premise, and everything about it is masterfully crafted. And the plot is a good example of that. What also works about the plot for me is the atmosphere. This Godzilla film has a very, very creepy and mysterious and mystical atmosphere about it. It's very similar to Gamera Guardian of the Universe, in that there's some very interesting and mystical and kind of creepy build-up with what the monsters are and why they're here. And it's similar to Guardian of the Universe in that regard, but it's also slightly different in that it's much darker. In that it's all about the restless souls of World War II and death and destruction and the incoming apocalypse of Japan. Very, very interesting and very creepy. So, some very fantastic atmosphere and build-up. The other scenes of atmosphere that I always liked are Baragon's first appearance in this film. So creepy. I mean, he bursts through a wall of a tunnel in darkness and roars at the camera and kills a bunch of bikers. Very, very creepy. Mothra's first appearance is also that way, though not as creepy and slightly cliched, but we'll get to this in a minute. When Mothra first appears, she comes out of Lake Akita in larva form and kills a bunch of teenagers. It's also very, very creepy and has a great build-up to it where the teenagers go out on a canoe or something onto the lake, and they all fall into the water by something, and they're all swallowed under the water by something. And then Mothra bursts out of the sea and comes at the teenagers. So very, very creepy. My problem with that scene, and this is potentially my only problem with GMK, actually two problems, and they both involve Mothra. One, there is a slight overuse of American horror cliches, and what I mean by this is there's too many scenes of teenagers getting killed by the monsters, and the teenagers are doing something, you know, rebellious and, you know, teenagerly. Like, you know, they're robbing a gas station and then they try to kill a dog. So yeah, of course, we want to see them get killed by the monster, right? Or in the case of Baragon, they're you know, causing public property damage and torturing, you know, kind of elderly people on bikes, you know, kind of cliched. Ghidorah's I like because it's a reference to Heisei Gamera. I'll describe Ghidorah's briefly. Ghidorah, what happens with Ghidorah is the guy who played the detective, I forget his name, in Guardian of the Universe through Revenge of Iris, plays a businessman in this film who attempts to hang himself in a forest and falls into the cavern where Ghidorah is sleeping. I actually really like that. The businessman who finds the monster and no one believes him is not as cliched as the teenager thing, though it is one that I see pop up quite a bit. But I don't have a problem with it because it's an epic reference to Gamera. And there's also quite a horrific scene where he sees the three heads of Ghidorah frozen in ice. So I really like that scene. My only problem with it is that it doesn't really feel like a Godzilla movie. And you can argue, hey, it makes GMK feel very unique, right? Not really unique, just not like a Godzilla movie. That's really all. It's not really unique or anything. It's just it doesn't feel like a Godzilla movie. So I really don't like that. However, it's kind of a double-edged sword because it also kind of works. And here's what I mean. The teenage angle works in a way that it also doesn't work. It doesn't work because it doesn't make this feel like a Godzilla movie, but I almost get the sense that that's the point. Here's what I mean by that. The teenagers don't respect, you know, public property and are acting rowdy and are ultimately, you know, they make fun of Godzilla. It kind of works because that's kind of the point of GMK, is that Godzilla is a reminder to people who've kind of forgotten about him and forgotten about the horrors that Japan committed in World War II. So it kind of makes sense that we'd have people who don't really abide by the laws of the Godzilla universe, if that makes any sense, and are kind of annoying and disrespectful to the past. It works in that regard, in that Godzilla and the Guardian monsters are there to remind them of the horrors that Japan committed in World War II and of Godzilla himself. That works fine, but it still doesn't, it still is a little noticeable and a little hackneyed, so I really don't like that. And I'm not saying that we can't have scenes where the monsters directly kill specific people. I mean, Shizuke Kaneko has that all over Heisei Gamera, but it's a little bit too hackneyed in GMK. And I don't like that. But it also kind of works in a way. So that'll fittingly bring us into the human cast. I really, really like this human cast. They're all very interesting, very likable, and very unique. And all very, very distinct and three-dimensional. They all have their flaws, they all have their wants and goals, and they all have motivations. Yuri is a very, very ambitious young, wants to be a reporter, though right now she's a host of cheesy sci-fi docudramas on a crappy, as a guy in the film says, bargain basement of the airways station called BS Digital Q. By the way, I like BS. In that she wants to be a legit reporter and she wants Digital Q to become that, but and she thinks that this Godzilla thing is a good way to get there, and that it's kind of a mix of both, and that she's very likable for that, in that she's also extremely ambitious in that she wants to prove to people that just because she's a woman, she can also be forceful and get things that she wants done. And the film is also extremely commendable for that. And what also makes all the characters 3D is Commander Tachibana, in that he beats a cliche that I criticized last film of having someone taken away from you by Godzilla. In that back in the original 1954 attack, Tachibana's parents were killed by Godzilla. And as I said last time, if they're parents, it works fine, because it's an understandable pain. If it's a friend, it does not work, because again, unless you develop the relationship. But with a parent, it's kind of implied, so it works in GMK. And Commander Tachibana is very likable and sympathetic, and a very tragic individual for that reason. And what I also really like about him is that he's kind of the human reminder of what Godzilla did back in 1954, in that he himself constantly wants to keep Japan on alert for the potential return of Godzilla, even though it's extremely unlikely. And that before the potential return of Godzilla even happens, he's still giving a lecture to his soldiers on what Godzilla did and what Godzilla is, and that we should always be alert. And also, after Godzilla has returned, he's constantly pushing for certain things to get done, like the anti-Godzilla plan and all this stuff, though it doesn't get done because people still don't even think it's Godzilla yet. So, I really like Tachibana. He's a very dark character, but also one who's likable. He's not one without humor. I mean, he has his scenes of levity and his scenes of humbleness, but he's also a very, extremely serious and hard-boiled character. So I really like Tachibana. He's a great Godzilla character, one of my favorites, and beats that cliche that I mentioned last film, which will unfortunately be brought up in the next film, but we'll get to that tomorrow. Back to GMK. So overall, I absolutely love the human cast of GMK. I think they're all, for the most part, well developed. Their motivations are sound, and they all have certain personality quirks and strengths and weaknesses about them that make them feel real, but also fun to watch. So I love the human cast of GMK. I think it's slightly like they took the blueprint of Godzilla 2000's human cast and slightly made them more interesting. So I really like this human cast. They're all quite interesting and likable and fun to follow. So I like this human cast. So let's get on to the monsters of GMK. There are a lot of them. There are 4 basically in total, but I have quite a bit to say about each, so I apologize if this section is a little long. I actually want to start with Mothra, because she's my biggest weak link with the monsters. Mothra does not have enough screen time. And I know that people consider her not among the coolest Godzilla monsters. I disagree, but people don't really consider her a cool monster. So I never hear many people complain when she doesn't get a lot of screen time. Like, I mean, I never hear anyone complain about how she's only in about 3 seconds of Final Wars. And I never hear anyone complain about GMK, how she has very little screen time. But it legitimately bugs me in GMK. In that she feels very, very out of place because she doesn't have much screen time. And this might be just the fact that she's one of Godzilla's most unique enemies and most unique Toho characters, but she feels a tad generic, like she's just a thing to fight Godzilla, and I don't like that with Mothra. Yes, it's a dramatic redesign, but we have that with Ghidorah, and it doesn't bug me with Ghidorah, and Ghidorah is my favorite Godzilla monster, so for some reason, it doesn't bug me that Ghidorah gets a massive redesign, but Mothra does. I think ultimately the problem is that Mothra doesn't feel like Mothra, and she just feels very out of place. And kind of almost shoehorned into the story in that not only does she have a brief fight scene with Godzilla, but she has no build-up like Baragon and Ghidorah does. She is like she's easily the least developed of the 3 monsters that Godzilla fights. and doesn't have enough screen time. And I wish she had a longer and more independent fight with Godzilla, and not one that simply was with Ghidorah. And I know she has a fight with Godzilla, with Ghidorah not there yet, but it's too short and in the same location that he fights Ghidorah that I feel like Mothra doesn't feel independent enough from the other two monsters to really make her distinct. And I feel like Baragon and Ghidorah do have that, so Mothra is somewhat disappointing for me in this film. Aside from that, though, I like her redesign. I like the design itself. It looks a lot more streamlined and more... It looks a little bit more threatening, and that works for this Mothra because this is a Mothra that kills people. And not only does it kill people, but she's supposed to be a lot more of a brute force Mothra than other interpretations of Mothra. So I think it's a good move to make her more streamlined and make her a little more threatening. So I like the redesign. She feels a little bit shoehorned into the story and doesn't get enough screen time or development. So, like the redesign, don't like her place in the story. I honestly think I would have less of a problem with it if she was someone else, like, say, Varan or Anguirus. So, it might just be because she's a big Godzilla monster in terms of past appearances, but since it doesn't bug me with Ghidorah, it shouldn't bug me with Mothra. So, you know. So let's get into Baragon. Baragon is the only monster whose name isn't in the title, and I'm not complaining. I mean, GMK has a infamously long title. I mean, I was talking to someone earlier, and this is someone who's not a Godzilla fan, and I had to explain to them why I wasn't calling it by its real name, why I was calling it GMK. So, you know, Baragon, the fact that his name is in the title doesn't bother me only because the title's long enough. But what bothers me is that he's awesome in this, and he deserves more attention than he gets. He fights Godzilla separately from the other two monsters, and once he's defeated, he's very quickly forgotten. Like, once he's killed by Godzilla, I feel like Baragon is kind of forgotten. Because what bothered me was, when Yuri is reporting on the final fight in Yokohama where Godzilla's fighting Ghidorah and Mothra, she says that all the Guardian monsters are here, and that's not true. In spirit they are, because they explain that all the Guardian monsters share a spiritual link, so Baragon is there in energy, but he's not there physically, and I wanted to see that. I thought that'd be cool to see all three Guardian monsters fight Godzilla. And I wouldn't have even minded something like Baragon being resurrected. Like, that would have been fine with me. So, I love Baragon in this. I think he's a great redesign. I think he's a great reworking. And I think of the three monsters, his reworking into being a different thing than he was originally works the best and is the least clunky. Despite my liking of what they did with Ghidorah, he is a tad clunky, only because it's a drastic redesign. In that, you know, Ghidorah is always a villain, and now he's a good guy. With Baragon, it's less clunky and makes more sense. And again, I wish, and I think the film would work better for what Kaneko's trying to do if it was Anguirus and Varan, because Baragon fits in with those two. They're all four-legged monsters, and they're all reptilian, and I think that just works better. But I'm getting off track. I've already talked about this. So I really like Baragon's redesign. I like the suit itself. I like the face. I love the new roar. Because infamously in the original Frankenstein vs. Baragon film, Baragon had Godzilla's roar. So, of course, we can't have that in this film. So it's a good redesign. So I really like the roar, and I really like the suit. I love how the ears flap. I think that's a creative and intricate touch. So I really like Baragon. I wish he was more involved in the story. Like, he has plenty of screen time and plenty of build-up. Just once he's killed, he's quickly forgotten, and I don't like that because I like his redesign. So I wish he had more place in the overall impact of him. Like, I wish he had more impact, basically. Like, once he's killed, I wish he was talked about more, and I wish he was either resurrected or kept alive long enough to be in that final confrontation in Yokohama. So I think Baragon, well executed, just not fully carried through. So I do ultimately really like Baragon, though. So that'll bring us into Ghidorah. And yes, I'm intentionally saving Godzilla for last. Alright, here's the thing. Ghidorah is infamous in GMK because it's the only time Ghidorah ever appears as a good guy in a Godzilla film, or in any Toho movie, because even in the Rebirth of Mothra trilogy, he was always a villain. It always bothered me until about the last year and a half. With me becoming so involved with the Godzilla community, I feel like I've grown to not care about it because the idea of Godzilla anthology just seems more natural to me than it did about a year and a half ago. So it doesn't bother me anymore that Ghidorah is a good guy because I understand and more fully appreciate the idea of Godzilla anthology. So it still kind of bugs me. It's a little jarring to see Ghidorah as the good guy and Godzilla as the villain, but you get used to it pretty quick. And somehow it strangely works in a way that you don't expect. I mean, Ghidorah was always the space monster that was always the enemy, but in this he's just the 1,000-year-old dragon. And that somehow works, it somehow makes sense. The idea of a three-headed dragon being slain by ancient Japanese samurai and becoming a spiritual guardian of Japan, that just seems to make sense. Yeah, sure, it's Ghidorah, but take those past films out of it, and just look at the film on its own merits, and it works pretty well. So, I think Ghidorah, the only problem with Ghidorah is that he's been in films before and has been radically different. So I think if you can get past that, he's awesome. And has a fantastic fight with Godzilla. I love the redesign. It's a very unique looking Ghidorah. I like the use of Varan in his face. I don't know why, but I just do. And his roar is actually a good combination of the classic Ghidorah roar, and also he's a strange mixed in with the 91 Ghidorah roar, which was very different. It was kind of based on Rodan's roar. So I like that combination. So I love Ghidorah's roar in this, and overall he's just a good redesign. I think the only problem with is in his characterization, and that we're used to him being a villain. But again, I think if you can get past that, he's quite good. So I like Ghidorah in this film, you just have to get past that bump. Otherwise, I think he's great. So that'll bring us into the final monster. Let's talk about Godzilla a little bit. This character has been officially named as Ghost Godzilla, and on ZGC Monthly Reviews in July, I talked about how there was supposed to be a film called Godzilla vs. Ghost Godzilla, where Godzilla battled his spectral ancestor. And I never ever equated that with the GMK Godzilla because I always thought that this was just Godzilla. But now I understand why on closer viewing of this film, in that Godzilla is not really alive anymore. They acknowledge the fact that he was killed back in 1954, and they seem to hint that this Godzilla is not a rebirth as much as a resurrection, in that the angry spirits of World War II found a good host with Godzilla and brought him back to life and made him stronger, so that way he could seek vengeance for both him and also them. So I never caught that until this viewing, and I never equated that, but it does make more sense and makes this again a very unique characterization for Godzilla, in that we're taking the revenge thing even further. Now it's for the horrific acts that Japan committed in World War II, and also for the fact that the Japanese have forgotten about them. This works beautifully, in my opinion. I think this new version of Godzilla is fantastic, and easily Godzilla's best characterization in the Millennium series. It's a very dark characterization. I think it's quite brilliant with what Godzilla was originally, and I think it's a great recapturing and great expansion upon his original characterization in 1954, so I absolutely love this Godzilla. The thing that might be a little jarring for people who are big Godzilla fans and haven't seen this movie is the fact that Godzilla is unquestionably the villain. And in the past, whenever Godzilla's been the destructive force, he's never quite been the villain. He's always just been the destructive force. In GMK, that's not the case. He is unquestionably the villain. And that's perhaps problematic, but really not. It's only problematic kind of similarly to Ghidorah, again, if you know Godzilla. So get over that bump and it's fantastic. So I love this characterization for Godzilla. It's not a sympathetic Godzilla like the Heisei era Godzilla, but it's a dark characterization. So I love this Godzilla. He's extremely badass and extremely powerful, and that's really cool. And just to talk about the design, I love the GMK Godzilla design. I love the taking back to the it's kind of a taking back to basic Godzilla design, in that the Godzilla 2000 suit that was used in Godzilla 2000 and also in Mechagodzilla was an extremely crazy redesign, and GMK is not that way. So I do think it works, and I love the blank eyes. I think it works for this being a kind of a spectral reincarnation of Godzilla, but also one that's unequivocally evil. So I think that works. And I ultimately overall really like the design. I love the head. It's extremely expressive, very mean looking. And overall, I also really like the posture of the thing, because it's a very unique Godzilla posture. The spines are a little different, but aside from that, the posture itself is a tad more hunched over and a tad more dinosaurian, and I really like that. Originally, Shizuke Kaneko wanted Godzilla to walk like a T-Rex in this. I'm ultimately glad they didn't do that, because I like the classic Godzilla posture, but it's cool and is definitely a good redesign. So I absolutely love the GMK Godzilla design. It definitely works for Godzilla's characterization, but it's also extremely badass. So I really like this Godzilla design. Otherwise, though, I think it's a good dark reworking of Godzilla. I think it's a good expansion upon the original 54 characterization. And just overall, I really like this Godzilla. He's unquestionably the villain, which can be somewhat problematic if you know your Godzilla. But this film has so many drastic reworkings of characterizations that I think that just on the basic premise of GMK, you have to get over it. And if you don't, this movie won't work for you. So get over it. If you do, I think it's fantastic. And Godzilla's characterization is a good version of that. Though it's not as drastic as Ghidorah, because Godzilla has had villainous characterizations before. He was just never unquestionably the villain like he is in GMK. So that can be somewhat problematic. So with that said about the monsters, overall, they're kind of on a case-by-case basis. Love Baragon, love Ghidorah, love Godzilla. Mothra doesn't work for me. She doesn't have enough screen time, she doesn't have enough development, and she feels somewhat shoehorned into the story for me. So Mothra doesn't work for me. The other three work fine for me. So that's the monsters for me. They're kind of, you got to take them by a case-by-case basis. But overall, they're all fascinating reworkings, all great. And Shizuke Kaneko continues to prove that he knows how to give classic monsters new origins and make them cool. He did this with Gamera, and he continues to do it with Godzilla. So, really, really like the new monster origins. Mothra is the only one that doesn't work for me. So let's get into the themes a little bit in this film and the allegory. GMK unquestionably has a theme, and unquestionably has some social commentary in it. Maybe not allegory, but definitely social commentary. So let's talk about the theme first. I think overall the theme is of a forgotten struggle. The forgotten struggle of Japan versus Godzilla, and also that's embodying the forgotten struggle of Japan in World War II and what the Japanese did in World War II. I especially like that kind of goes hand in hand. That the fact that the Japanese have forgotten about Godzilla and kind of ridicule him. I mean, there's this great scene where some people, when one military commander says, "To be quite frank, sir, some of the men don't think Godzilla really exists." And there's also this great scene, once Godzilla's finally made landfall, where this, mom screams out in a grocery store, "What's up? Evacuate? That can't be. Godzilla's just a legend." I really like that scene. And, you can take those as comedy if you want. You know, just take them with a wink and a smile. But they're more than that. Because it's Shizuke Kaneko. Again, I can say his name, you know, this being his film with confidence because he wrote the screenplay with a couple of other people and he directed it. So I mean, this movie is a Kaneko Godzilla movie in the fullest sense of the word. And also that you can take them with a wink and a smile, but they're more than that, unquestionably. In that they're representing the Japanese trying to forget and make light of a really tragic incident in their past with the attack of Godzilla. And this is represented by Commander Tachibana, with him being a survivor of the original Godzilla attack, one of the few that are still around, and he's the only one who takes Godzilla seriously and continues to take him with some weight and with some thought. Like, he's the only one who is troubled by the idea of Godzilla returning. Everyone else just seems to think that he'll be very little, much so a problem. So Commander Tachibana represents that, and the rest of the cast represents the Japanese's attempt to forget Godzilla, but he's representing that the Japanese are attempting to forget what happened in World War II. So Godzilla in this, the theme of GMK is that Godzilla is a reminder of our past, that we can never forget our past. And if we do, we're going to be harshly reminded of it, and that's what Godzilla represents. And that's what Godzilla has always represented. It's just brought to the forefront in GMK. We forgot that Godzilla destroyed us in 1954, and we're making fun of him now. Bam! He attacks again and destroys our country again. And then this brings us into the social commentary. Two things. One, the social commentary of Japan kind of forgetting what they did back in World War II, all those aggressive and imperialistic acts they committed. And Godzilla being a reminder that they did that, and that they still have to remember it and continue to avoid it. And that's what Godzilla represents. And in human ways, there is an old man in the film, who I believe his name is Professor Amora, and well, that's revealed at the end. Throughout the rest of the movie, he's just called the Old Man, who seems to walk around in the woods and rave about Godzilla's return. And he's the one who brings up the idea that Godzilla is embodying Japan's aggressive acts in World War II, and the restless spirits of all those that both died defending Japan, but also died at the wrath of Japan. And that's what Godzilla represents. By the way, that almost makes it more fitting that Godzilla would attack Japan. I mean, Godzilla was always representing the mistakes of man, of creating the atomic bomb, but the only problem with that was always that Japan didn't create it, they just suffered at the wrath of it. I mean, it always worked because that's, Japan was the only country that ever did. But it makes it even more fitting that Godzilla would have to attack Japan in GMK. And that he's directly embodying Japan's mistakes in World War II and Japan's mistakes in forgetting about that. So that's where the social commentary comes in. And then the second thing, I think Shizuke Kaneko is dissing people who diss Godzilla. Here's what I mean. At this point, Godzilla was still raking in dough at the box office in Japan, but in America, people had kind of forgotten, and to this day still don't know what and who Godzilla is. So I think Shizuke Kaneko is commenting that, alright, you guys forgot what Godzilla is? Here he is, and then he destroys all the people who make fun of him and don't take him as a serious threat. And I think that that's strangely symbolic of the way Godzilla was looked upon in 2001 and the way he's looked upon even now. And maybe maybe 2014 will make GMK outdated, though I don't think so, because that's just one of the two social commentaries. And that one's a little bit reaching, I'll admit, but I think that that's definitely part of Kaneko's point, especially with Godzilla's characterization. So I think it's kind of him saying, yeah, you guys don't take Godzilla seriously? Fine. Bam, now you're dead. And that's represented by a teenage girl, who is staying in a kind of a retreat on one of the Bonin Islands, and is making fun of Godzilla with her friends one night, and guess who attacks? Godzilla. So he's kind of saying that, alright, you want to make fun of Godzilla and not take him seriously? He kills you. And I really, really like that, and it's just something I take to heart as a Godzilla fan who's been suffering with that my entire life. So I took that personally and really liked that. And I also like how that's not the only point of the film. That there's also, one, a good story, two, other good social commentary, with that just sprinkled into it. So this is the way to do social commentary, and the way to do a theme. In my opinion, GMK represents that, and is quite good at that. So I really, really like that, what GMK does with that. And I like this. I liked the fact that there's kind of a double entendre with the social commentary. So really, really like that. So with that said about the themes and allegory, let's talk about the last two things I always talk about: the effects and the music. Bam, let's talk about the effects. They're fantastic. They're easily the best suit effects in the Millennium series. They're just simply untouchable. They look like organic creatures. The thing that really impresses me about the effects of GMK is the facial expressions, particularly on Godzilla and Baragon. They look so lifelike and are so expressive. I mean, just the way the eyelids move and the way the mouths move articulately. It's very, very expressive. Give the monsters a sense of personality and make them seem more organic than perhaps they have in the past. So I really, really like the faces especially, but overall the effects are just very, very well done. Unlike the previous two Godzilla films, the film makes appropriate use of CGI, and the CGI also looks great. When Ghidorah turns into King Ghidorah, looks fantastic. When Mothra blocks Godzilla's heat beam against King Ghidorah, looks fantastic. This is easily the best CGI in the Millennium series, in my opinion. And also one that also really impressed me is when Ghidorah knocks Godzilla into the water, and we see this great shot where Godzilla kind of gets back on his bearings and swims through the water. It looks fantastic. So easily the best use of CGI in the Millennium series, and overall these are just the overall best and most well done effects of the Millennium series. So the special effects are absolutely fantastic and make this a very cinematic film to watch even on a home movie screen. So fantastic effects. And the same thing goes for the music score. The music score is done by a composer I really like named Kawatone. Kawatone did the effects, did the music score for the Heisei Gamera trilogy as well, which carried over with Shizuka Kaneko. And his music score is fantastic for GMK. I almost actually like it a little better than the ones for his Gamera films because GMK's soundtrack is more distinct. I mean, it's unquestionably similar, but I think GMK's soundtrack is more unique than the one of the Heisei Gamera trilogy. It's overall fantastic, but I almost find it more unique. But overall, I really like the soundtrack of GMK. There's not a ton of use of Ifukube music in the actual film. I don't find that a problem at all because it's used in the ending credits and used epically. So I do really like though the overall score. I think it's very dramatic, very emotional, and makes the film very, very cinematic. So definitely my favorite soundtrack of the Millennium series. So with all that said about GMK, I absolutely love this movie. I think it's potentially the best of the entire Millennium series. It's an extremely masterfully crafted and unique Godzilla film with a distinct and unique and great vision by Shizuka Kaneko to make something that is an extension of the original Gojira's in both tone and story, and continues to carry the themes and tone of that film, and makes a Godzilla film that is both extremely traditional and identifiable, but one that's also extremely unique and distinct, and overall you want to watch it because it's just so damn unique and so damn cool because of how unique it is. So I really don't have any problems that dampen the film experience with GMK. Easily my biggest problem with it is Mothra. I think that she's a little bit shoehorned into the story and needed some more screen time and development to be truly as great as the reworkings of Ghidorah and Baragon. I think she's a little bit too shoehorned in and doesn't have enough development, but she's the only really weak link in the film. And since she doesn't, it's almost like her problem helps it in that the fact that she doesn't have a lot of screen time doesn't really hurt the movie. The rest of it is just so fantastic and so stellar that I have to give GMK a 5 out of 5. It's just an amazing and it's just an amazing Godzilla film. Cool to watch, unique, just amazing. A great Godzilla film. Watch it. It's fantastic. I would almost say that if you're trying to introduce a modern film watcher to Godzilla who resists the idea of Godzilla, show them GMK. It will convince them. It'll show them who the original Godzilla is, but it will also give them a unique and standalone film experience. So if you're trying to convince someone who doesn't like Godzilla to see Godzilla, show them GMK. It's a fantastic Godzilla film. 5 out of 5 from me. Watch it. So that'll about do it for this review of Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. Oh my god, I can't believe I just said that again. So that'll about do it for this review of GMK. So, that'll about do it for Godzilla Palooza Day 27. We're starting to wrap up our month-long tread through all the Godzilla films. And tomorrow we're going to get into the only Godzilla film in the Millennium series that had a sequel. And we're going to get into the first remake of a classic Godzilla film when tomorrow we get into 2002's other reboot that starts in the original, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. I'll see you guys tomorrow for that review. Sayonara.